what the Student Experience Roadmap is talks about is safe and welcoming learning environments. So uh, that include outstanding learning environments and system resources. So my question to you, our dream team, what makes a learning environment welcoming? And I might just jump into you with you, Ella.
Um, what makes a learning environment welcoming? I'd say having the lecturer engage with um, the students, like um, initiating questions, answering questions. Um, yeah.
Okay, so and Alexandra.
I definitely agree with what Ella said, and I found a lot of my experience in tutorials, the where I've had a welcoming tutorial is when tutors make an effort to come around and discuss things with students. So maybe we'll be working in groups and the tutors will come around and work with individual groups. And having that opportunity to connect to something, I think, makes students feel a lot more comfortable to speak up and discuss and take risks because you have that person to person connection and you don't necessarily feel like there's a huge gap between yourself and the staff that you're working
Okay, and what are
Mine is gonna be very simple, but seeing like a classroom full of people actually just helps. If you see just like one table of students instead of like the whole class, just makes you feel like, okay, maybe I shouldn't have come then. Yeah, that kind of
okay?
stuff. Yeah.
So and so that kind of that group effort and that kind of the energy that you get in a room
Mm.
is that how you feel? Is that right for you?
Yeah, something like that. And like, just attendance. It's very like, like you don't really think about it, but then imagine if you go into like a conference hall and it's like empty, you're just like, am I in the right place? So you just feel like a little bit like unsure about like whether you're supposed to be here or something like that. And then you're also like you kind of like doubt yourself about whether you can actually learn something. I feel because again, Ella mentioned something about participation, so did Alessandra, participation with the tutors and everything else. So engagement, there's the lack of engagement when you see like there isn't a lot of students. But thankfully, so far, majority of the classes are always full, so that kind of helps.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that was your experience last semester. That there were many people. There was good attendance, basically.
Mm-mm.
Okay, so that's a really interesting thing because I mean sometimes attendance kind of tends to go down over the semester. So Alex, how about you?
Yeah, I've been in lots and lots of classrooms over my 8 years at EQ, and I found the most welcoming ones always just ones where either the lecturer or the tutor just tries to connect with the students and really builds that personal rapport is what makes a lot of students come back. And as you said, the attendance does tend to drop as the semester goes on, but I found that where there's a really visible effort to connect with the students, um, it's a lot less so than other classes.
So someone once said to me that they really liked it when somebody actually just knew their name. Is that an
Yeah,
important
literally,
part of
yeah,
the
just
experience?
sort of basic stuff like that. And I know everybody, students and tutors alike, probably hates icebreakers and stuff like that, but doing just basic stuff like that and remembering the answers to, you know, easy get to know you questions actually does go a long way for the students.
Okay. So my other question on that one, and this is one a question around for me, it's about what about the room? So does the actual room, does that change your experience at all? I mean, we've got some fantastic learning spaces at UQ. Sensational.
Yeah.
There's some
Um,
very, very beautiful and very, very functional spaces, and there's some spaces that maybe are probably not quite the same. So, do you want to talk about that, Ella?
yeah, the advanced engineering building is just beautiful. There's a big lecture hall where you can see the lake with the windows. And I think that would also increase attendance as well. So, yeah, I think the environment in terms of the lecture space is very important.
Would anybody else like to, thanks, Ella. Anybody else like to talk about that? Alexandra.
Yeah, I'll just chip in and say not necessarily something about the way the room looks, but the way the seating's set up in the room. I always find that if we're set up in tables where you can work in groups and it's really conducive to discussion and group work rather than rows of tables and chairs, people tend to interact more and it's a bit easier to build a sense of community in the class.
Okay, so that the opportunities to collaborate, to speak with your peers, to learn from your peers.
Yeah, and it's a lot easier to do so, I think, when you can actually face each other rather than having to sit next to somebody in a row.
Okay, nice. Water?
So on that note, right, with what Alessandra said, I do have a suggestion then. So because one of our courses that we have to do is Sci 1000 and it's set in a lecture theater, and it's a closed off, like no windows, no nothing. I don't know if it, makes a difference, but maybe instead of like doing it in a lecture theater, we could just do it like a tutorial class instead. So because inside 1000, there's a lot of participation in terms of like, the professors or doctors, sorry, will, ask around if, like, because they will ask us to create our own models and blah, 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 and everything else. So instead of having I think it's called workshop, yeah. Instead of having the workshop in the lecture theater, maybe they could change it to a tutorial instead, tutorial class setting. So yeah. But other than that, everything else was good, like because the chemistry lectures were in the advanced engineering building as well. So that was very good and conducive. Yeah, that's all I have. Yeah.
So I'm interested in that, Water, because I actually saw one of the Sci 1000 lectures last semester, and so you've got like it's team teaching, isn't it? So you have two
Yeah, two teachers.
lecturers,
Yeah.
teachers, and so they kind of like manage to interact up because they spend their time running upstairs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like it's too much for Tim.
Okay. I think Tim's in the room, Tim.
Oh yeah.
Hi, Tim. And Alexander, Alex.
Yeah, I definitely agree with what everyone has said already. I think, especially to Alessandra's point, definitely getting that sort of group environment is really important in making a sort of safe and comfortable learning environment. I did secondary education as well during my undergraduate, and you can see a very big difference between the sort of classroom layout in high schools and everything like that, and then getting to uni where everyone is coming in as adults and with a want to learn and to connect with others who are passionate about the same things. I think having that group experience, even though it's uncomfortable at the start, I think for many students, I think it really helps in the end.
Okay, so we might move on given our time frames. Okay, so the next, Tanya, can you move to, yep, that's, if you go to the next slide, please. Okay, so one of the next section, one of the sections in the Student and Spirits Roadmap talks about learning modes and the idea of transformative curricula and pedagogies and assessment. So, and we at UQ also like to, I guess, pride ourselves on making sure that sort of we provide exceptional teaching and learning opportunities. So, if you had to choose just one, which would you be your preferred learning mode? Okay, so we've got asynchronous, which means that you learn, you don't necessarily attend lectures at the same time as they're on. We've got synchronous online, where you actually turn up on Zoom to watch the lecture at the same time. We've got synchronous in person, so in one of those fabulous lecture theatres or collaborative rooms, or some kind of combination. So, just as a matter of thinking, I might start with you, Alex, because you've kind of had quite a lot of experience over the years. Because I think you're our elder statesman here, so to speak.
Yeah, I've experienced all of these, having started at EQ prior to COVID and then being there all throughout and through the sort of hybrid phase that's now being phased out. And definitely, I prefer synchronous in person. I think it's the easiest way to be present and actually in that sort of learning environment and to get the most out of going to class and being there. So definitely synchronous in person for me. But I could see the advantage to asynchronous because people are very busy and everyone has things on.
So, so Alex, so having watched those things, is there more are more people tending to be in the space now? Is there a shift? I mean, I know we have UQ has kind of suggested that being on campus is a very important part of everybody's learning experience. But have you noticed that that's also the case?
I think I have noticed it. I think it's and to throw myself under the bus a little bit, I did notice when I was online that I just wasn't really as present. And I think a lot of my friends and classes and everything, we were there and we were still learning, but definitely not as keenly aware of what was going on really with everything. And obviously it was a global pandemic as well, which was a whole nother concern to worry about. But I think it definitely helps the learning experience to be in person. And I think a lot of people would agree with me on that.
Nice. Now, Ella, I'm going to go to you because I'd love to talk about your experience most recently.
Yeah, so last semester, majority I went online. So it was an asynchronous sort of system I had, where I'd watch the lectures after they had been done so that I could pause them and write notes and everything. But I'm actually next semester going to change to the synchronous in-person sort of format because I've found that I'm not as engaged in the lectures, but I do still prefer module-based learning. So having topic by topic videos and then questions afterwards, I think I work the best with that sort of system online.
Okay, so and I guess you can always go back and review the lectures later anyway as well.
Yeah. So I think it's good having the synchronous side because it's already like scheduled in your timetable. You don't have to try and find spaces to then watch the lectures.
So you're actually thinking you're going to be set up for a better success or better form of success this semester?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, nice. Alessandra?
I would actually go for a combination personally. I definitely enjoy synchronous learning where it's possible. And certainly for something like tutorials, I really like to go in person because I think you can do a much wider range of activities when you're actually in person. And I like having the opportunity to work with other people in my class. But I really value when you have the opportunity to watch lectures asynchronously after they've actually taken place, because just when things get so busy, sometimes your timetable is all over the place. It doesn't work out nicely. Sometimes you have work or something like that. So having the opportunity to watch a lecture online makes it a lot easier to fit everything into your week most efficiently.
So you said when you have work, so you tend to, and this is a question that we ask ourselves often, is that how do students work through their priorities? Because how many, you obviously have paid work outside your university attendance, Alexandra?
Yeah, that's right. And I think when it's something that's difficult to reschedule, it makes it a lot easier to manage your timetable if you know, okay, I can watch this lecture on a different day instead. Because I mean, I haven't really run into the situation where I've had a lecture at the exact same time as I have to work every week, but I imagine it's possible that it could happen for some people. And especially with travel time as well. Like I don't live on campus, I live relatively far away. So if maybe your timetable will schedule a lecture at 8 a.m. in the morning and a tutorial at 5 p.m. in the afternoon. If you have the opportunity to maybe watch that later just to make your time, your timetable a little bit more efficient and try to cut down on all of the traveling in between time. I think that's really helpful.
So I'm sorry, I'm picking on you here. How long is your commute?
About an hour maybe, depending on traffic.
Okay, so an hour each way.
Yeah, which is
Okay.
not too bad really, but it's nice when you can try to fit things on the same day just so you can spend more time studying and less time traveling.
Okay, and one more question. Does that mean you spend a lot of time, so like if you had a morning and afternoon, and what about that space in between? Do you find a place? You obviously don't go home.
No, it usually, I mean, I've never really had the situation where I have to be on campus early in the morning and late in the afternoon. Last semester, for example, I had a lecture in the morning, but it was a recorded lecture. So I would just watch that lecture online and then come into campus for the tutorial. So I didn't have to sit on campus for about 7 hours and do nothing in the middle.
Okay, thanks. How about you? Which was your preferred mode? Because you're doing because you've come from study before, and you're also have chosen to, because you're an international student, aren't you? And you've come in to do this particular program. Do you want to talk about, so maybe compared to previous experiences, perhaps?
Okay. So the setting for my previous school was they only had in person actually. It was synchronous in person. To be fair, that was quite a while ago, like 10 years. Yeah, and so they didn't really do like they didn't really record their lectures or anything else. But I understand that the unis in my country, they did that, just that during the tertiary, like, the poly, like the technical diploma, I think you guys call it, that those kind of schools, they don't really record the lectures and everything else. And if you do, you need to request from the lecturer to record. So it wasn't really like a simultaneous thing. Yeah, so it was mostly in person. So from that, I actually prefer in person, but now I've come to appreciate a combination actually. So like when you're in the class, you can obviously participate in everything else, because there are some questions where you can, sorry, there are some moments where you can ask the lecturer like questions right there and then, right? Usually after or something like that. Yeah, and then if you miss anything, you can just like, scoot back home or go some corner in the library or something, and then just refresh the lecture, the recording or something like that. Yeah, so I'm definitely a combination person. And like to like back Alessandra, I think she said something about the tutorials. So in one of our courses, I think it's Bio 1020, the tutorials, it's not recorded, and they don't give you answers unless you ask your fellow classmates who have gone. So there's a pro and con to that. The pro is that, obviously you have to go and then, whatever. But the con is if you don't have time and you feel like um your timetable is a little bit like smushed, and yeah, and you're having a hectic week or something like that, whatever your personal reason is, you probably have to like, search for answers from your friends or even the at discussion. But again, the variable is that you don't get your answers immediately. You have to wait for your friends to reply, or like the professors or the tutors to like reply to you and all that. So that might take a while, instead of just like, going over for the class and then getting your answers immediately. Yeah. So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, nice. Thank you. Thanks, Tanya. Okay. Um, okay, so the other thing that we also hoping to prioritize in terms of that transformative pedagogies and curriculum, we thought about the kinds of different assessment tasks that you might be asked to do or take part in over the semester, and thinking about your last semester and thinking about how that kind of played out. And so we've got a selection here that we're kind of ranking these assessment tasks in your preferred order. So we've got design project, problem-based challenge, we've got essays, exams, and simulation exercises. Now, I'm pretty sure that you've probably done other types of things like quizzes and sort of labs and lab exercises that you have to hand in as well. But can you kind of give me an idea about which of these assessment tasks actually makes you particularly, and I'm thinking about the wide range of experience here. So we've got a couple of people who are in their first or second year of university, and then we've got people who have experienced university in another place, and we've got Alex who's experienced a long period, you know, like I'm making you sound very old here, Alex, I don't mean that, but has well experienced in university, the order of university. So what makes you happy when you see that on say when you see something like a problem-based challenge on your assessment protocols? Might jump in and I'll go for Ella, our first year.
Yeah, I can't say I've experienced all of these yet in my first semester. I've definitely done exams, but I think all I can say is I'd like to see more different assessments. I haven't really seen much yet.
Okay, so you've only of that list there.
Yeah,
you've
out
only
of all
done
of them, I've done exams, I've done like one case study, but that's about it.
Okay, so you like exams, or
I think they're good to like show your knowledge, but I think in terms of learning, I think other assessments might be better.
okay? Can you just pop the other question in there? That's okay. So in terms of part assessment is about learning or assessment for learning. So part of the student and learning experience. Sorry, the learning and the student experience roadmap. So many roadmaps. What we're trying to develop is a sense of critical thinking. So in your exams, do you have that sense that you might be developing that thinking around when you complete that essay or that exam?
Um, yeah, I would say so. Um, my exams, I haven't had any access to like internet or anything. So you have to think about the problem, and just use your own knowledge for it. Um, but I would say that having access to like other resources in like problem-based challenges or like assignments, you get to actually learn more and increase your knowledge.
Okay, nice. Thank you. Now I'm going to pick on you, Alessandra, because I know you changed degrees, and I'm thinking about they're kind of like they're quite contrasting, really, aren't they?
Yeah, they're super different, and that's definitely reflected a lot in the assessment. Like, I see a lot of essays in my arts degree. So, in answer to your earlier question about what makes me excited, it's when I see something that's not an essay, not because I don't necessarily like them, but because it's nice to see variety when usually all of your assignments are essays. To see something different always makes me a little bit interested and wondering what it is. I think in my experience, it's not necessarily the mode of assessment so much as how people write the assessment questions or frame them. I've certainly done a lot of exams that don't necessarily test your critical thinking ability. I remember I did one that was open book and basically regurgitating knowledge, and that kind of thing really doesn't test your critical thinking at all, because you're not required to do much except recall and know where the information is if you forget. But I have to say that, especially recently, I've also done a lot of exams that do kind of test those skills, because they frame the questions in a way that you have to synthesize things across topics, compare and contrast things from different weeks, or bring lots of information together. And so I actually really like those types of exams, because I feel like it does force me to think a lot over like the information that we've learned and how I can put it all together and form it into an argument. So when I did those types of exams this semester, I definitely felt like I was learning a lot.
Okay. Border.
Yeah, so thankfully, because Bachelor of Science, we do everything. So except for design project actually. And like the perfect course to give you as an example is actually Sci 1000. To be honest, I kind of didn't like it. But after like the whole course was over, I was like, it was actually pretty well planned, because you have your lectures, you have your workshops, which also did a little bit of simulation exercises. Um, and then you have your practicals, which did problem-based challenges, and also like the some of the assessments were simulation exercises. And then obviously you have the last one, which is the exam. And I also liked how like when like they don't really ask you like a math question, and they expect you to like just regurgitate the formula and everything else down, and then like, okay, as long as you have that answer, you're good. But the exam was in such a way that they actually want you to explain your reasoning so that they can kind of like understand whether you got the grasp of the concept or not. So that was actually quite refreshing, especially since chemistry and bio is just like it's either A or B, that's it. And it's either you got it or you don't. But with Sci 1000, you have that flexibility in that sense to prove to yourself that, hey, I don't know the actual answer, but I know how my thought process is supposed to be. Yeah, and also they had the essay aspect as well because philosophy of science. So yeah, it was very well-rounded. You were definitely very like active in the participation as well. And I must also say that if you miss like one or two lectures or workshops, you definitely have to refresh your memory. Like you have to look through the content because if you don't, you're just lost. So yeah. So that was a really good top course actually. So
So there you go, Tim.
yeah.
Can I just quickly ask you? You said at the end of the course, I realised that implies that you spent a bit of time thinking about because I know that often there's a kind of a sense that people go, well, students just take their marks and run, basically. But to me, what you've just told me is you go through a whole process of reflection, you go through a whole process of thinking about, what you've actually learned. So can you just unpack that for me for a second?
Oh wow. Okay, yeah. So I mean, when I first started like doing Sci 1000, genuinely, I'm so sorry, you guys, but I kind of hated it. There was like a lot of like, and because like the course was very heavy in terms of participation in school, like there were four things you have to do. Like you have the contact classes, which is Python, and then you have the workshop with Dr. Tim and Dr. Sarah, and then you have the practical as well, and then obviously you have your other assessments. And I think during the like while I was doing my course, that course at least, I was like, oh, do I have time for this? Can I prioritize? Like, you're still figuring it out. But then I figured like, you know what, just do it. And then just like just keep going for it, like because you might never know, it's just the first few weeks or something else. And then like I it also helped that like when the exam period, because I genuinely thought it was gonna be just like question answer, that kind of black and white kind of thing, and then poof, that's it, right? And then to be honest, I was like, I'm going to flunk this. So, but when Dr. Tim and Dr. Sarah was like, yeah, we don't want like if you have the answer, great, but if you can explain your thought process and everything else, that'll be even better. So we can still give you a mark, because you kind of understand it, but you just haven't really figured it out till the end, like how to get the answer. And so like and then like when the exams were over, obviously you're just like, oh, okay, I don't have to touch this anymore. Let's go. But then when I was thinking back, like between my other courses like bio, chemistry, and also I did neuro, right? I felt like I learned the most in a more effective manner with Sci 1000. Yeah. I don't know if it's because like, I went for the classes in person, all of them, I try as much. And then again, did the thing where if I don't understand anything and I need to like, like get back to that or like do notes, you check online. And then again, if you don't have like you feel like you still don't know the answers to that, you just ask on at discussion. And Dr. Tim is very fast and efficient. So once you ask, he'll just like shoot it right there and then like on the day itself. Kudos to that. Then yeah, so I learned the most in the critical sense also like in my Sci 1000. Whereas for bio and chemistry was just like, okay, this formula will give you this, blah blah blah. That yeah. So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much because I think you've just given us a masterclass in the student experience of a really interesting course. So thank you for that. Alex, now all the courses, tell me.
Yes, I, as you said, I've experienced all of these through my time at uni, um, both myself and also as a academic tutor for undergrads. So I've seen how I work it, I've seen how other students work it, and personally, I definitely prefer the sort of design projects and problem-based challenges and simulation exercise, those sort of really active activities that are hard to design, but definitely it gets myself thinking, it gets the other students thinking about sort of creative ways to tackle problems, which I think is something I wasn't totally on board with the first time I sort of had to do these activities. I would have much rather preferred to just write an essay, because I surprisingly like writing essays now after all these years. Um, but I think the one thing I sort of came to realize in doing these sort of creative assessments, I suppose, is just how important they are once you finish university. Um, because I don't think I realized until graduating that there is that sort of university bubble where everyone that you're in your classes with and everything cares about all the same things you do and realizes the importance of what you've been studying and working so hard towards. And it's slightly more difficult to articulate that to people who haven't gone through the same sort of process you have. So I think this sort of creative activities really helped me to gauge what I've learned and how to express that to other people who don't have the same education I have or who don't really understand the years I sort of spent working towards getting my degree. So I think for me, definitely the creative activities really helped me with that. And as much as I do love writing a good essay, I think I do prefer the sort of creative ones.
Okay. So that kind of critical thinking, is it that ability to articulate? So, we're coming out of once we leave as you quite rightly pointed out, the bubble of university, that how do you articulate why somebody should give you a job?
Yeah, it's I think it's a lot easier said than done. It's very much it definitely depends on sort of what area you're coming from, I suppose. But coming from an arts background, I did a triple major in history, writing, and English lit for my undergrad, which absolutely no disrespect to the arts because art graduate myself, but I think a lot of people sort of cast a downward eye on the arts, which they absolutely shouldn't. But it is one of those degrees where people look at it as sort of a joke out in the real world, I've noticed, which is quite disheartening to see. But being able to articulate what exactly it is that I did during my writing degree, because I think people look at that major especially and just go, what did you actually do for 3, 4 years? And I think having the ability to sort of summarize exactly what I've learned and the skills that I've gained, especially through these like design projects and stuff that I did for my capstone courses for my writing and English literature, being able to summarize exactly what I've learned and how those skills could benefit whatever job I'm applying for was really important to me. And I think they definitely helped me for that.
Awesome. Thank you, Alex. Tanya, I think we've got one last question. Otherwise, we'll go to... Okay. Can you just throw all the questions up for me, please? Okay. So we were talking about this the other day in a session around feedback and how do you give good feedback and how do you receive good feedback, because there's a reciprocity about feedback that sometimes we don't think about. So how does receiving, and we're just going to have neutral here, how does receiving feedback make you feel? Okay, so the feedback when in this particular case could be somebody writing good job on your essay. If feedback might be it might be extended. There might be verbal feedback or recorded verbal feedback. It might be just an awesome mark on your exam. So how do you feel about that when you receive that kind of feedback, Ella? Because particularly coming out of first semester, first year, what makes it palatable and what makes it useful, I suppose?
Yeah. Well, I think I found compared to high school, you really have to go out of your way to get feedback. Whether it be like the exam viewing, like you actually have to go and see it. Whereas at high school, they just give you drafts feedback where like it's more finals now, there's no drafting. And I think feedback is good. It makes me know what I could improve on. The only time I've felt negative towards feedback is when in high school, one of my teachers put on the screen in front of everyone my own writing. And he didn't say that it was mine, but it made me feel bad. It made me feel frustrated. And I also didn't feel like it was warranted as well. Like it was for physics, and in chemistry we had the same assessment, but it required a different sort of approach. So then I had that chemistry approach towards my physics assessment, and I felt like I'd just, done the wrong thing, but it didn't feel fair to have that shown on screen for everyone.
Okay, so that kind of experience where your work was held up in a negative way?
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Alessandra.
Yeah, I think feedback can be really useful. And I think there are different types of feedback. Sometimes you're talking to your tutor before you've actually put an assessment in. And I think when you do have the opportunity to talk one-on-one in a collaborative manner, that's really good. When you feel like you're working with someone, you're asking them, you can ask questions, maybe your tutor gives you a response and you can discuss something together. I think that's one thing that makes receiving feedback feel a lot better, because it doesn't feel like somebody's just telling you everything that you've done wrong. It feels like you're working together to try to solve the issues or the problems you're having in your assessment. In terms of receiving feedback on a final assessment, I always appreciate when it's something that can be applied to later assessments. Sometimes you get something really specific, which is still helpful, but when you know, okay, this is something that I can go and use in my future assessments, I think that's what makes it feel really constructive.
Okay, so that feedback for feeding forward, so to speak.
Yeah.
Okay, nice. What's your experience been?
Well, mainly, well, if like for example you do an essay and then they would definitely put comments on that essay, right? That kind of feedback, I feel like it's good to know, but then sometimes it doesn't help. So like what Alessandra said, like the collaborative manner, that really helps. So if you're in person with, again, you have to like go out of your way to do this, of course. You're in person and then you can ask the professor or the lecturer or something. Then that's, I guess, when you can get the best, because they're the way, like most of the teachers here, they just tell you like as it is. So obviously you don't feel like, oh, like I'm incompetent or something else. In fact, you feel like, you know what, if he sees me as somebody who can do this and then just tells you as it is, like, hey, you just need to like look at it in a different way, or like, apply this and blah blah blah, and then you're like, okay, I feel like motivated, that I know how to do it. I just need like that little tweak, which like the teachers already gave me feedback for. So yeah, I generally I don't feel negative at all, in UQ at least. Yeah, and like they've always been really great. Yeah.
Nice.
So
I
yeah,
like that idea of motivating feedback.
yeah.
So feed forwarding and motivating feedback. Alex?
Yeah, I really love feedback. Having done teaching and everything for years and years now. I honestly think in university, at least, the most valuable feedback I received was when I was encouraged to share my assessments, well, drafts of my assessments with other students and have those shared with me and then give feedback to each other. I actually found that super valuable just because it gave me one, just another perspective on it, and also helped me um, give feedback to other people because I think that's a skill that kind of gets overlooked, which is, fair enough. I don't think anyone's really expecting students to give valuable feedback all the time, but I think it is really important to be able to, critically read over a friend or a peer's piece of assessment and be able to, critically analyze it and give them that feedback while still being friendly and comfortable towards them. And I think that was really valuable. And I really appreciated um, when people read over my work and were critical enough to tell me what was wrong with it, because I knew it was coming from, the same sort of perspective that I had. They were, they're a fellow student trying to get the best grade possible. And that really helped me.
Fabulous. Okay, so thank you. I wanted to just spend this last, I think we've got about 3 minutes perhaps before we kind of have to get out because the next session starts at 11. Firstly, well, are there any questions from the floor? Is there anybody out there in Zoom land that's got a burning question? Oh, here we go. Chris, Chris Frost has asked me a question. Asked you, Alex, a question. How could the importance of creative activities being communicated to you during your study?
Yes, that is a very good question. And I feel like quite a complex one almost, because I feel like I didn't come to realize the importance of creative activities until I sort of discovered it for myself. And in some ways, I feel like if I'd been explicitly told that, these activities are designed to help you for, so and so after university, I would have almost tuned out, which seems a bit silly to say, but I feel like um, the best way to sort of communicate it is in the actual design of the assessment itself, whether that's um, I think for my history capstone, we had the option of doing uh, lots of different final assessments for that, but one of them was designing a lesson plan for a group of year 9 students, say if you were doing education, or I think one of my friends designed a board game for children. And I think stuff like that, which was really creative and sort of made us realize um, that once we finish university and take our skills out into the real world, there are so many different levels of education. And I think that was sort of communicated through the design of the task rather than explicitly told to us. So I think that's really the best way to sort of showcase the importance is illustrating that there are many different possibilities for your work and how it's perceived. But yeah, it's quite difficult to sort of articulate how important these creative activities are because yeah, I don't think I really understood it until it sort of just clicked for me one day, and I realized how useful they are.
Nice. Is there any other questions for our panel? Just looking. No. Okay, right. My panel people, have you got any questions?
There is another question in the chat.
Yeah. Back in the
question is, are there any situations in which you find a lecture theatre preferable to other room layouts?
I think that was in regard to when we were talking about the comparison between lectures and it's like the with Sci 1000, whether you can go to the flat floor water.
I think that lecture theatres are important in terms of like um, having the environment to listen. So if you have your chair facing the lecturer and you have a smaller desk, you don't have as much in front of you, and it gives you like the right headspace to just sit and listen. But I would also say that's important for lectures, but if it's workshops or tutorials, it's really important to have a bigger sort of desk space to lay out more things, be able to write better, as well as communicate with students as well.